Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6, our week 2 Sunday slate. I've got a lot of good games on today, a lot of defensive games. There's some offensive shootouts for possibilities. As always, we're going to split it up. I'm going to do the AFC. We got a fancy new thing. Bam. Look at all that upgrading into the future now. Um, and we're going to split the games up. I'm going to talk AFC. Drew's going to talk NFC. We're going to give you our takeaways from what we see how we see these games going, as well as how we see the players being projected in points. So to start us off, um, we're going to go with the Broncos and Steelers. The Steelers last week were phenomenal. They had 8 QB hits, 3 sacks. I think they had 2 interceptions. And they were constantly blitzing Daniel Jones, rushing him, forcing him to make decisions he didn't want to make, whether it would be who to throw to or if to throw or to just go to the ground. They kept constant pressure, constant changes to their defensive looks. You can just tell they really overwhelmed an inexperienced quarterback. I see that going the same way and having that type of aggression this week against Drew Lock and the Broncos. Now, he's a good quarterback, but again, he's young. I mean, he played great against a good Titans defense. I was really impressed by what he did for sure. But the Steelers are going to come after him again, just like they did last week. So I expect Locke to maybe feel a little overwhelmed. I expect because of that, his weapons to feel the suffering of that as well. So Noah Font might drop a little bit in production. So will Jerry Judy. Don't give up on them. If they do drop in some production, just know the Steelers probably just they're a really good defense this year, and a really good defense last week, and they got a good matchup for this week as well. Because I also believe that the Broncos lost their one of their the starting right guard, so they're going to be dealing with an injury issue on the offensive line already. Um, And that moves us on to Melvin Gordon. He got a really good week last week in his debut with the Broncos. He had 15 carries for 78 yards and a touchdown. That's 5.2 yards per carry. That's always really good for a running back. Unfortunately, it came at the cost of Lindsey being out with a toe issue. Um, so we'll see how Melvin Gordon can do against the Steelers defense. Hopefully he can give Drew Lock take some pressure off his shoulders by providing a decent running game. However, again, like I said, the Steelers defense played great, not just on pass, but they played great in the run too. They held the entire Giants team to 29 rushing yards for a 1.6 yards per carry total on the team. Saquon Barkley himself, on 15 rushing attempts, was only allowed 6 yards. So it's going to be a Bronco. The Steelers are definitely a defense I would seek out. If you have them, start them for sure. If they're in your waivers for some dumb reason, pick them up immediately. Start them because they're monsters right now. It's I don't oversee the Broncos being able to overcome both of these deficiencies. Um, but we'll see how they do. But definitely looking to start the Steelers this week on defense. Big Ben, excuse me. Big Ben got back to his old self last week. Had a really good game. 200. I'm sorry. Did you say? Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. I thought you said something. He had a really good showing last week. Um, and Oh, and the Broncos are coming off a game where they allowed Tannehill to throw for 249 yards, 2 touchdowns with a almost 98% quarterback rating. So if Tannehill and their run-heavy Titans offense can do that against the Broncos defense, then after what Big Ben did to the Giants last week, I feel like that they can really light them up for sure. The Broncos did hold Derrick Henry to, they held him to 116 yards carrying, but the big thing to look at is it took him 31 rushes to hit over 100 yards, which usually doesn't happen for Derrick Henry. So that means the Broncos D was a little bit stout as far as holding their own, but DH was still able to hit over 100 yards. So I would look for that as far as the matchup. Now, John Connor, as of yesterday, we weren't know if he was playing or not, but as of this morning, it says that he's full go. I don't know if it's going to be limited or how limited it's going to be, but look for Benny Snell to maybe take some of the workload off of him. He came in last week for him and produced pretty well. So maybe look at that as a flex option. So for my projections this week, I got Big Ben at number 13 for the quarterbacks, 16 in PPR, 16 in standard, obviously. Juju, I have 13 in PPR, 8 in standard. Deontay Johnson, 13 in PPR, 8 in standard. Benny Snell, I have him coming in. It depends on how well Connor can go. I have him at around 9 in PPR, 8 in standard. John Connor, I have around the same amount, just because they may split a little bit. Eric Ebron, I have him at 5 in PPR, 3 in standard, just because I believe that Big Ben, he likes his tight ends, but he loves throwing to his wide receivers down the field. So, and for the Broncos, Drew Lock, I have him ranked as the 31st quarterback out of 32, so definitely fade him. Have him at 14 points. I don't see him doing very much against the Steelers defense. Jerry Jeudy, because of that, 11 PPR, 9 in standard. Tim Patrick, if you're very desperate, because I don't think Cortland Sutton's still going to play this week. He's going to have about an 8 PPR day, 5 standard. Melvin Gordon, the Steelers defense, like I said, is very, very stingy on defense against the rush and the pass. But because I feel like they have no choice but to either run the ball once Drew Lock gets overwhelmed, it's just going to force Melvin Gordon to have a 14-point PPR game or a 12-point standard. He's just going to get his regardless, just because they're going to keep giving it to him. And Philip Lindsay's out, so they really have no other choice. Noah Fant, maybe they're saving grace in the passing attack as a security blanket if they do blitz a whole lot, the linebackers and stuff like that. So he may have a 10 score game for PPR, and then 8 in standard. Despite the Broncos' success last week, Jerry Jeudy did look very good, even though he did have some drops. Despite the successes that they have with Noah Fant and their running game and all that, they're going against the defense. And I'm saying this as I am a Titans fan, but I will admit the Steelers' defense is the real deal so far this year, way better than ours. So look for them to dominate and just overwhelm just the running game and the passing game, and just run roughshod again, just like they did last week. So we'll see. I probably wouldn't start unless it's Melvin Gordon and he's like your flex or running back 2, or a really deep league, you have to start him. Other than that, I would fade just about everybody else on the Broncos just because of lack of time on the field. I believe there'll be a lot of 4.5 in that game for them. On the other hand, on the Steelers, I would dial up Big Ben. I would dial up Juju. Maybe put Connor in your flex in case. So he's taking up your big running back spots in case he does get limited carries or they have a certain quarter on him, even though he is playing. But yeah, just get a piece of a lot of the Steelers players. So I believe it's going to be a kind of a one-sided matchup this week on that. And then on to our next game. My personal favorite of the week, the Jags versus the Titans. Derrick Henry is ready for a full send, as I have in my new background back there. We're going to full send DH all over the field and all down the Jags' throat. He has always a great game when he plays against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And you look back to form again last week. Like I said, it did take him 31 carries to get 116 yards. That's only 3.7 yards per carry. That's not great as far as where he usually is. He's usually around 5 yards per carry. But the fact that he ran the ball 31 times shows that his body can definitely hold up to punishment and grinding down the other teams when it comes down to time of possession or just making the defensive line and linebackers tired from continuing to having to run up and hit you and push bodies to the ground and stuff like that. It's a different type of cardiovascular sensitivity. It's different. Go run a wind sprint and then go find somebody as big as you and try to just wrestle them to the ground like 3 times in a row and see which one makes you more tired. So I think that showed a lot about what he's able to do and what he will be able to do. Now Jacksonville last week was held to 22 rushes for 88 yards. Jacksonville held Indianapolis to 22 rushes for 88 yards, 1 touchdown, and that's 4 yards per carry. But keep in mind that Marlon Mack, he did went out with a knee injury, and that primarily turned Hines into their starting running back. And he went more into the receiving back role. That's usually what he's good for. That's what they have him for. So they kind of abandoned the run a little bit more than what they would have if they had Mac. And the Jags defense on the passing side of the ball, they allowed 363 yards for a touchdown and an 88.7 passer rating last week. So that's not that great for them. It's great for the Titans, but they did take 2 interceptions. C.J. Henderson definitely got one of those because Rivers is a gunslinger. He does have that play style. Ryan Tannehill does not play that way, though. He's more efficient with how he distributes the ball. Phillip Rivers takes a chance because he's got a really strong arm. But however, this week the Jags, they'll be forced to bring more people into the box because of Derrick Henry. Last week, since Marlon Mack got hurt and they had to rely more on Hines as their back, they were able to not fill the box. And for those of you that don't know, the box is from the linebackers and the defensive line. Usually there's about anywhere from 6 or 7 people in the box with linebackers and defensive linemen. But on heavy running teams like the Cowboys and the Titans and things like that, if the running back becomes effective, teams will like to stack the box and they'll bring safeties up or they'll add more linebackers. And sometimes you'll face defenses where there are 8 or 9 people in the box. That leaves your receiving game open to a lot more different options. So even though Indy didn't have a reason for Jacksonville to bring more people into the box and play more against the passing game. I feel like it's gonna, and they still allowed Phillip Rivers to have 363 yards and a touchdown last week and 88 an 88 completion rating. I think that does a lot for Ryan Tannehill. Even though AJ Brown is out, he is out officially. Even though he is, we got Johnny Smith still, Adam Humphries, and Corey Davis. I think they're all gonna dominate in one form or the other, whether it be by lots of possessions or whether it be by touchdowns and yards. I think they'll have to respect Derrick Henry, so that'll leave a lot of man-to-man, one-to-one matchups on the outside and one-on-one matchups with Johnny Smith, which can be an issue. Tannehill, last week he did have a 249 yards, 2 touchdowns, and almost a 98% passer rating. It's 97.9. So with that on the back of Derrick Henry's 31 carries for 116 yards, I just don't see this being that much of an issue for the Tennessee Titans. Not to talk biasly or anything, just being honest, the Jags, from what they showed last week, I don't see how their problems get any better this week. They had a bad passing game last year. They lost Calais, or a bad rushing defense last year, and they lost Calais Campbell in the offseason, so that made it even worse. So definitely don't pick up the Jags defense. Fade them for sure. Obviously, you're going to start Derrick Henry no matter what every week. Corey Davis looks good to me this week. He's actually going to probably be in my starting lineup. At least as a flex, because he does get moved to wide receiver 1 with AJ Brown being hurt. He does have to go against CJ Henderson, and, they did have 2 interceptions on Phillip Rivers. However you want to look at it, I'm not really impressed by it because Phillip does just sling it. So I would definitely get a share of Corey Davis, Derrick Henry, Johnny Smith. If you need a tight end, he's a very good tight end to have. He's underrated for sure. Last week he went 4 for 7, 36 yards and a touchdown. So he gets his targets. He's got 7 targets. And then he got 4 catches from those. So last week with the 6 points, the 36 yards, that's 9. He got 13 points overall just last game. And they weren't even really trying to use him. They were trying to just get Derrick Henry and everyone else warmed up. So he's definitely an option to look at. And like I said, Corey Davis is back. He did have a coming out party last week, 7 receptions on 8 targets. So they definitely were intending to use him a whole lot last week to get him back involved, because last year he wasn't the person that he should have been. He ended up with 101 yards, and I think he can at least do that this week. On to the Jags. There's not too much good to say about them from their defensive side. However, positively, Gardner Minshew did have an extremely efficient day last week. He had 142 passer rating, although he only threw the ball 20 times, but he had 19 completions out of those 20 attempts. So for 173 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that's pretty impressive. But it's not like he went out there and just slang the ball all over the place. So I'd like to see how he's going to face against our pass defense. We did give up only 216 yards and a touchdown and a 95 passer rating to Drew Lock, but they threw the ball a whole lot more. So it's going to be interesting to see if Minshew can keep up his efficiency this week. And then as far as the ground game is concerned for the Titans, our defense, we gave up 26 rushes for 107 yards and a touchdown. It's not great, but not awful. It's 4 yards per carry. And we also showed that we were able to hold the line and take a stand when the moment is the biggest. We did have some goal line stands last week, especially with Melvin Gordon, a really good note. He has a nose for the end zone. The fact that we were able to hold our own at some points really stood out a lot. And Jacksonville not having any real running back right now, especially that that Leonard Fournette type. I wasn't a huge fan of Leonard Fournette's anyway, but he was the type that if you got on the goal line, you gave it to him, get you at least 3 leaning forward. They don't really have much of that anymore. So I don't see the Titans D having that much of an issue with the Jags running game. It was speaking of the Jags running game, it was a little lackluster, like we were saying. James Robinson was primarily the go-getter. He had 16 carries for 62 yards on a 3.9 yard per carry average. So we can expect them to probably lean even more on Gardner Minshew for this game. They'll probably try to test him out again just to see, because he is a growing player. Granted, like I said, week 1 I would consider that like preseason. I'd consider this like preseason too. So James Robinson could be a diamond in the rough. You never know, or diamond in the rough. You never know. But so far their run offense does not look as good as their passing offense, and that's not saying much either. So if you have Minshew, in like a 2 QB league or a super flex or something like that, maybe try him out in there. But other than that, I would probably outside of DJ Chark, I'd probably fade the rest of the Jags team. So for my projections for Tannehill, I got him going 19 points this week. Derrick Henry, 20 in PPR, 18 in standard. A.J. Brown, like we said, is out with a knee bruise. So that brings up Corey Davis. I got him at least 12, maybe 13 points PPR, 9 in standard because of his high target volume. Jonnu, I have 11 PPR, 9 in standard. And then Adam Humphries, who we didn't talk about much, but is a very good sure-handed slot receiver that they have. I have him, if you need a flex spot, I have him getting 10 in PPR and then 6 in standard, just because, again, he is more of a high target person. He's not a down the field person. He works and gets his catches the hard way. So he would be one I'd be looking for. Minshew, definitely, like I said, a fade unless you need him. 15 points this week I see him getting, with DJ, his wide receiver, getting 12 points PPR, 10 in standard. Then we got another wide receiver considered on the list, Laviska Shenault Jr. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It's the first time I've seen his name. He's actually ranked as the 49th wide receiver this week at 10 PPR and then 7 in standard. Also, there's Keelan Cole out there for you guys if you really need another one. 7 PPR, 5 in standard, or 7 in PPR, 5 in standard. And then for the running backs, James Robinson, like we talked about, 11 in PPR, 9 in standard, and also Chris Thompson, who serves mostly as a pass catcher. I got him in 8 in PPR and 4 in standard because of that pass catching difference. So the next game I have slated up is the Bills and the Dolphins. Josh Allen showed a side a lot of coaches and fantasy owners have been waiting to see with his passing. We knew he was athletic. We knew he can run. We even sat here and said that, definitely start him, but understand that not a lot of his points are going to be from his arm. It's going to be half of it from his legs. But he proved all of us wrong. I mean, he could still do that, but he proved all of us that there was more to his game than just that. Last week he had 312 passing yards for 2 touchdowns and 104.6 rating. And off of that, Stephon Diggs caught 8 of his 9 targets for 86 yards. And John Brown also had a really good game as well. So if you had any of these guys, you were on your fantasy team, you definitely had a happy week last week. Technically, the Dolphins pass D held Cam under 200 yards, but that wasn't because the Dolphins defense was so dominant. It's just the Pats game script was more around running the ball. But they did force an interception. But Cam still had over 100 QB rating. So granted, it was on only 19 attempts, but I wouldn't give the Dolphins the praise on that one at all. So be a little bit, don't get sucked into the numbers. It's more of the context of the situation. Like I said, the Pats did run a lot, and that's where you got to see the real Dolphins D allowing 5.2 yards per carry for 217 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. So when the defense was really tested in an area an appropriate amount of times, you saw them fall apart. They just got demolished. The Pats did whatever they wanted to do to them. Most of the rushing damage was done by Cam, though. And that's significant because they're playing Josh Allen, who is also an athletic QB like Cam is. So maybe we will see the old Josh Allen back this week, and it won't be a 312 passing yard day. It'll be maybe more of a running day for Josh Allen, since it showed a little bit more success for the Pats and Cam Newton. Both teams' running games weren't great. Last week, the Dolphins really didn't have anything except except Fitzpatrick's beard. That was really the only good thing about their offense last week, passing or running. The Bills' passing defense showed it's still elite with allowing only 210 yards and 1 interception, or 1 touchdown and 1 interception, with a 75.3 rating for the Jets that they played last week. So they're still showing that they're picking back up where they left off last year, and that's not good for Fitz and the Dolphins. Expect that same effect on Fitz. He only had a QB rating of 44 last week. Stephon Gilmore ate them up. He definitely had a chip on his shoulder from the last time that they played, for sure. So for the players I got with Fitzpatrick, I would fade him altogether. I didn't even put a projection on him. Just don't play him at all, because it's not going to do great. I don't even know if he's going to finish the game. I can see this being, if he starts having a shaky first half, that if Tua is ready to go, this might be the game we see Tua come back in. Antonio Callaway, one of their receivers, he's out until week 6. So if you have him, I would let him go. If there's bigger and better out there. Devontae Parker, he's questionable with a hamstring and a game time decision. So if you have him, he didn't have a great week last week anyway, but he's still a good player to have. So definitely hold on to him. But I would just be having someone waiting in the wings, and be watching the news come game time. So if he does play, you can keep him in your lineup. Even if he does play, or I would see him be limited. So you might want to sub him out for this week if you can find a viable option to kind of replace his numbers. If he were to have an average week, find someone that could kind of replace that. And then for the running backs, I got Jordan Howard not being much of a factor this week with 5 in PPR, 4 in standard. And then Matt Breida, I got him at 5 in PPR, 4 in standard as well, not doing much. Gesicki, I think just because they don't know what else to do receiving wise, they'll fall back to him like they did last year, and he'll get a 10 PPR, 7 standard type of day. Preston Williams, he could be the wide receiver we see the most of. If so, I see him getting 11 PPR, 9 in standard. So my takeaway from this game is the Bills offense will probably score at will. But the defensive secondary for the Bills is what's really going to make the headlines to this story. They're great, and the Dolphins are limping into this game, so they're prime picking for that defense. So on to the Chiefs and the Chargers. This is actually the Chargers' first game in their new stadium. I don't know if there'll be fans allowed or not. But either way, look for the emotions to be high for the Chargers. So football is a very passionate sport, so are other sports, but it's a very passionate game. So players tend to up their game a little bit when they are fired up some. So that gives a plus to a lot of the Chargers players that you would usually start anyway. Mahomes, week 1, went 24 for 32, 211 yards, 3 touchdowns for 123 passer rating. Kelsey 6 for 6 on his targets and receptions for 50 yards and a touchdown. What I'm saying is, and the Chiefs are they picked off right where they left off last year. If that wasn't enough for you, let me offer you this and see if you buy in on what I just said. Sammy Watkins, 9 targets, 7 receptions, 82 yards and a touchdown. Tyreek didn't have a great game, but it was 6 targets, 5 receptions for only 46 yards and only 1 touchdown. It's a little bit of a letdown because of their reputations, but let's be honest, the Chiefs are still the Chiefs. They didn't slow down a bit. They just spread the ball out more. So it didn't really feel all powerful and all juggernautish as they usually do. They were trying, and plus they had their running game that they were building for. So, and the Chargers pass defense allowed the Bengals to 173 yards and an interception with a 66.1 QB rating to Joe Burrow. So the Chiefs are going to have a little bit more of a matchup challenge, I would say. But I don't see that being significant enough. But not only do the Chargers have their work cut out for them through their passing attack, but now they have a running game to worry about with Clyde Edwards-Helaire last week, who had 25 attempts, 138 yards with a 5.5 yard per carry. The Chargers did hold Mixon to 69 yards at 3.6 yards per carry. But there's, I think that was more because the Bengals were trying to still find themselves as a young team. The Chiefs know who they are. So I think it's going to be a little bit different as far as how the Chargers are going to play against the run. I think it was more of it being because of the Bengals, not necessarily because of the Chargers. And then the Chargers on offense, they're trying to find their identity in the running game. With Eckler, despite being considered the feature back, it didn't get overwhelmingly better. He didn't get overwhelmingly better numbers than his spell running back. Eckler only had he had 19 carries for 84 yards, but Josh Kelly also had 12 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown. So, granted, they both had good numbers, but they're both like kind of right there on the cusp of maybe a two-headed monster type situation like they had with Melvin Gordon and Eckler when they were at the top of their game. They said Eckler was going to be the guy going into it, but from the numbers and what you see again, the context, not the stats. It doesn't feel that way. So I don't. I would still keep Eckler in. If you can get a share of Josh Kelly, maybe put him in your flex as well, since they play them both equally. But again, it's only week one, and they're still trying to get a feel for themselves, so that could change. But just keep it at least keep Josh Kelly on your watch list this year. But this is the ideal situation for the Chargers because the Chiefs can't seem to slow down the run yet this year. Last week they allowed 22 carries to David Johnson for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. He averaged almost 5.5 yards per carry. So I think this will be the week that the Chargers can find out which running back they like and who they want to go with more. I feel like this is the opportunity that Eckler and Kelly both have to show what they're capable of, and this defense will allow them to make that decision going forward. The Chargers do want to keep the time of possession in their favor by having a successful running game, because the greatest defense against a great quarterback and offense like Mahomes is having a really good running game. What they don't want this turning into is a shootout for Tyrod Taylor, or Tyrod Taylor, I should say, sorry, going against Patrick Mahomes. It's never going to work. You're going to lose that 10 out of 10 times. So I think they're going to test Kelly and Eckler often and early and as much as humanly possible, and they hope that it works for them. And also the passing numbers and everything like that from the Chiefs game, I wouldn't worry necessarily if you have their defense about how they showed last week. Just remember it was garbage time. They put up a lot of points really quickly, so their defense did play kind of loose. So don't read too far into it from that situation. So on to my projections. Mahomes, I got at 23 across the board. Clyde, I got him at 15 in PPR, 12 in standard. If you got Darrell Williams, I got him at 8 in PPR, 6 in standard. Tyreek, 16 in PPR, 13 in standard. Sammy Watkins, I got 10 in PPR, 8 in standard. Mecole Hardman, if he's your thing, 8 in PPR, 5 in standard. If you're super deep and down to Demarcus Robinson, 5 in PPR, 3 in standard. Travis Kelce, again, the man, 17 in PPR, 14 in standard. Onto the Chargers with Tyrod Taylor, 19 across the board. I think he's going to have a decent week just because he can do a little bit of everything, even though it's not all. He can't do it all great. He can do it all decently. So that gives him a little bit of an X factor. But Keenan Allen, I got him at 14 in PPR, 11 in standard. Mike Williams, 13 in PPR, 10 in standard. Austin Eckler and Josh Kelly, I got them Eckler a little bit more. He's 13 in PPR, 10 in standard. And Josh Kelly, I got 9 in PPR and 7 in standard. So they're still a little bit even. So like I said, if Josh Kelly is out there and you have a bench spot for a player that you're probably never going to play anyway, I'd pick up Josh Kelly just to sit him and see how he does, because if he shows out against this game too, I think you might have a real 50-50 split backfield on your hands there, and that's always good to have when you get someone off the waivers like that, if you can get that type of production from someone like that. So on to the Ravens and the Texans. What else can I say? Deshaun Watson is going to have a really hard time with this game. I feel bad for him. I feel bad for him. He's having to deal with a top-tier defense after finding out against a lesser defense what life is like without DeAndre Hopkins. Granted, he did have 253 yards, a touchdown, 1 interception, but only an 84.5 QB rating. The numbers might not look that bad, but you have to remember who they played. And most of those numbers came from the end of the game being garbage time. Garbage time, for those of you that don't know, is when a team is down behind another team so bad that they catch up the defense that they're playing that's ahead of them, of the team that's winning. They loosen up so they don't let the team they'll put their backups in. They'll loosen the secondary up, so more of the field will be open because they're trying to protect big plays to the end zone. So they make the team work the field to get down there, so that to prevent a score. So that's why you'll see Deshaun Watson with 253 yards passing, but only one touchdown, because when it came time for them to score, they actually kept them out of the end zone, but they allowed them to drive down there to it. So that's what garbage time is, for those of you that don't know. So don't let those numbers fool you. Definitely still start Deshaun Watson if you drafted him, because he is a top quarterback, top tier QB, and he's capable of great things any week, even in garbage time. I mean, you could still get. It's about fantasy. It's not about if the Texans win or not. It's all about his stats. So if they get into garbage time and the Ravens give it to him and he takes it, you could still end up with a good game from him, even if his team actually loses. So the Ravens D is coming off of a 168-yard pass, one touchdown and one interception, 65 passer rating game against them, which is a very, very dominant showing that they gave us. And the Houston's line hasn't seemed to have gotten much better, and they're still allowing Watson to be chased and hit just like last year. Last week, he had 7 hits and got sacked 4 times off of those hits. And if it wasn't for his pure athleticism, he would have taken at least 3 more sacks. So it could have been 7 hits, 7 sacks. But just because he's such a great quarterback, top tier talent, he was able to escape 3 of those. So again, favor the Ravens defense on that. Running game wise, their offensive line showed it may have a unit that can have some success rushing this year, with David Johnson getting his 11 carries for 77 yards and a touchdown. It was 7 yards per carry, which is really good. That means the line was open and holes up for him really big. The Ravens actually did give up 5.1 yards per carry last week to the opposition. So you might have something there as far as matchup wise. So I'm interested in seeing how that works out. I myself have shares in DJ, so I'm definitely interested in seeing that matchup. And the Texans gave up 4.9 yards per carry last week, so both have something to prove or exploit in that area of the running game. Lamar Jackson last week, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 152 QB rating. He went 20 for 25. He's shown us again that he's more than just a running back. Houston's pass defense struggled last week significantly, allowing 203 yards and 3 touchdowns and 123 passer rating against them. Houston's defense only had 1 sack, and 0 of those was from J.J. Watt. And Ronnie Stanley returned to practice. Ronnie Stanley's the left tackle for the Ravens. He returned to practice this week, so he could be playing. So Lamar Jackson hadn't even had this whole offensive line this past week. So we could get the whole line back. And then Lamar's got, a complete brick wall to – obviously he wants to throw again this year. So I think he can do whatever he wants to at will, and there's not much Houston's defense can do about it. J.J. Watt really needs to step up and show that defense something, because since he got that big paycheck, he kind of – and now granted it hasn't all been his fault. He's had some back problems and stuff, but he's got to get back up to form, especially with Clowney gone. He's got a lot on his shoulders. So this might not be the game that he does it in, but he's got to make something happen, or he's not going to be in Houston for much longer, I can guarantee you. So I got Watson this week getting 20 points just off of pure athleticism. Duke Johnson, their pass catching spell running back, I got him at 4 points PPR, 2 in standard. David Johnson, the starting Johnson of the Johnson & Johnson team, I got at 15 PPR, 12 as standard. Will Fuller, 14 PPR, 11 in standard. Brandon Cooks, he's questionable, game time decision, go figure, like always. But if he does play, look for him to get maybe like around 9 or 10 PPR and 8 in standard, because even though he's always questionable, it seems like he's always game time decision. When he plays, he looks fine. Either that's a testament to how mentally tough he is, or a testament to like how much he wants attention from his athletic training staff. I don't know. But it always seems like he's hobbling off the field after the game, but then the next game he's ready to go. So I don't know. If you do have deeper leagues and Cooks doesn't play and you need some people, Kenny Stills and Randall Cobb should be out there for you. I got Randall Cobb getting 8 in PPR, 6 in standard. Kenny Stills, I got getting 6 in PPR, 4 in standard. And if you need a tight end really, really, really bad, if you have a double tight end league, Jordan Akins, got him at 6 in PPR, 3 in standard. For the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, again, rated the number 1 quarterback this week. I think he gets at least 25 points. Hollywood Brown, 14 in PPR, 11 in standard. Miles Boykin, who showed up a little bit last week, 7 in PPR, 5 in standard. Willie Snead, I got 8 in PPR, 5 in standard. If you guys got some deep leagues and need some receivers, there's a couple for you. Mark Ingram, big trust. I got him at 9 in PPR, 8 in standard. J.K. Dobbins, who I feel like they've been favoring a little bit more in different situations that are more favorable to them because of his youth. I got him at 10 in PPR, 9 in standard. Not too far from Mark Ingram. They're kind of equal, but I don't know. I just got a good feeling about J.K. And then Mark Andrews, the number 2 tight end this week outside of Kelsey, is 15 PPR, 12 in standard. Again, the Ravens dominate. The Texans do not have the talent on the offense to rattle the Ravens defense, and the Texans defense doesn't have the effect or the talent to rattle the Ravens offense. And Watson will continue to realize and miss, or to continue to realize what a blessing DeAndre Hopkins was for that team and how much he will miss him. So we do have one more game left, and or actually 2 more games. I'm sorry. We got Seattle and the Patriots. So as I said earlier, Cam had a great day as far as doing what he wanted and being Cam. I think the Pats did a really good job just letting him open up and do his thing. Cam had 15 carries running on the ground for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns with a 5-yard per carry average. He actually ran the ball 5 more times than anyone in the backfield. So he was more of a running back than the running backs. And he rushed the ball twice as much as he actually threw the ball. The team overall had 200 rushing yards, so it's looking to be their focus right now to see how that'll work out with that backfield, Cam being included with Sonny Michel and James White. And then Seattle, as far as on the defensive side of the ball, Seattle had held Todd Gurley to 3.4 yards per carry, which is really good. However, they allowed Atlanta to get 434 yards, 2 touchdowns, and only 1 interception from Atlanta last week, and only on 54 passes. So that means Atlanta, not only did they put those numbers up, but they did it efficiently. Um, so if the Patriots are gonna start trying to air the ball out more, this seems like a good time to do it since Atlanta had success and the Patriots are really good at. I wouldn't say, not saying plagiarizing, but they're really good at taking what works for other teams and using it against that team the next week. Russ himself had 322 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, and 145 QB rating. So New England has something to watch out for themselves, though. However, New England's pass defense is harder than ATL's, and Stephon Gilmore got an interception last week, so he's already fired up and he's ready to go. Good luck to Russ on that one. having the reigning defender of the year coming back, and you having to throw against them. Russ did have success running and scrambling, so probably his ability to improvise will test the Pats D, make them move around, and get in uncomfortable situations to where they have to. Stephon Gilmore doesn't get afforded to just guard a wide receiver and watch him. He also has to keep his eyes always in the backfield to make sure where Russ is. So I think that might keep the Pats a little bit more honest when they're anticipating what the play is or where the ball is. So, and for my projections for the Seahawks, I got Russ at 17 and a half ish. I couldn't decide 17 or 18, so 17 and a half. Chris Carson, I got him at 4 PPR, 11 in standard. Carlos Hyde, he's more of a watch list type of thing, but he did have a touchdown last week. So obviously they're drawing up something for him here and there. So definitely if later on in the season or just if he ends up getting more carries, keep a lookout for him on your waivers. If you got a bench spot for him, it wouldn't hurt to keep him there for a couple of weeks to see what happens. So DK, I got him ranked 13th in PPR, 9 in standard. Lockett, I got him at 14 in PPR, 9 in standard. Olsen, 7 in PPR, 4 in standard. He did show out last week a lot better than I thought he would. But just to throw out there, The Athletic reported that last year's tight end Will Dissel should be more involved going on if needed. So that's worth at least a bench spot for me. If you not if you have Olsen, it's not a good bench spot to cover, just because you need to diversify where your teams are. But if you are in need of a deep bench tight end or something like that, hold on to Dissel for a little while and see if that really holds water and if Dissel does start to make more of an impact into the offense. And also Greg Olsen, he's had foot problems the past couple of years. So if that ever flares up, Dissel would be the one that they would go to, and Russ already has rapport with them. So it's good to hold on to for sure for a rainy day. So for Cam in the Pats ratings, or projections, I should say, I got Cam at 19 across the board. Sony Michel, I got at 20, at 12 PPR, 7 standard. James White, I have at 8 PPR and 7 standard. Damian Harris, one of their other running backs, is on IR, so that's more carries for Cam Sony and James White if there wasn't enough people touching the ball already. So I would expect them to go back to instead of either having Sony or Damian Harris be the one that carries on the goal line, to it to be just like Sony in the predominant run situations, James White in the obvious pass situations. Now, granted, they might switch it up, but I feel like projection-wise scoring, Sony's going to have the lion's share of the carries. So that's why I gave him 12 and only James White 8. Julian Edelman, got him at 13 in PPR, 8 in standard. N'Keal Harry, 11 in PPR, 7 in standard. New England, like I said, did focus on the run. They also did pass the ball, though. And when they did pass the ball, it was very efficient. Julian Edelman had 7 targets and 5 catches. N'Keal Harry had 6 targets with 5 catches. And James White had 3 targets with 3 catches. So even though Cam only threw the ball 19 times, he connected 15 times for 155 yards. So they're easing Cam into both things. They're trying to get a feel for him. They're trying to ease him into it. So I think it could go either way as far as what Cam is able to do this game. But I think no matter what, as long as he continues to do this and keep defenses honest against Cam and he stays healthy, both of his games will continue to grow. And when Cam was the best is when he was having fun and he was just able to have a really good receiving core to throw to. So Julian Edelman, just an X factor going into this game to let you know. He did break off a 23-yard run last week. So kind of look for that. I don't think that's going to happen like every week, but defenses definitely now have to respect Julian Edelman because of that play as a runner when he's in motion or he gets near the backfield or something like that. They have to respect him as a running back or as a runner, I should say, because of that 23-yard rip that he had. So I could also see them using him a lot as feints, like just moving him around in the backfield, trying to again confuse the defense like they do. But the Seahawks are well coached on D. They're really smart, so it's really going to be a battle of wits, coaching wise. So it's going to be very exciting to watch. So yeah, so that basically covers it for the AFC. Drew, you got what you got for the NFC?
All right, I'm gonna start out with the Cowboys and the Falcons. For the Cowboys, they're riddled with some injuries, even on the offensive line. Collins is out this week, and Tyron Smith is battling a neck injury. He is questionable. But I did read a report from Sports Illustrated that sorry. Yeah, Ronald Leary is in Dallas, and he is talking to the Cowboys. He's in COVID protocol with them, so he's not able to enter the building yet, but they are having virtual meetings. So look for them to get that deal worked out, try to beef up the line a little bit. The Cowboys line last week allowed 3 sacks and 7 QB hits. So the injuries playing a part in that, but for the most part, Prescott looked pretty decent with all the pressure that he had. If they can keep him upright this week against the Falcons, they do have a nice matchup. The Falcons gave up 4 touchdowns and a 143 passer rating last week. So if he can get some time with the weapons that the Cowboys have on offense, I believe he can have some success. Zeke, I mean, he looked like Zeke. He accounted for both touchdowns the Cowboys scored last week. He averaged 4.4 yards per carry. He, like I said, it just looked like Zeke, and I look for him to be a big part of that again this week. Defensively, the Cowboys didn't look so hot last week, and with the offense that Atlanta has, it's kind of scary to be honest. Speaking of the Falcons' offense, Matt Ryan put up over 400 yards last week against a good secondary. So again, that's scary with the matchup against the Cowboys defenders. They are kind of weak in the secondary. So
in all fairness, Matty Ice
see how that turns out.
Has his story.
Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Russell Gage all had over 100 yards receiving last week. So that not looking good for the Cowboys secondary. I think Todd Gurley might have a better week than he did last week, and he's always had good games against the Cowboys. And Cowboys did struggle against the run last week with Malcolm Brown kind of picking them apart. So it should be an interesting matchup with both defenses kind of struggling last week. We'll see how it turns out. As far as projections go, the Cowboys, I have Dak at 21 points. I have Zeke at 19 points in PPR and 16 in standard. Amari Cooper, I got him at 15 in PPR and 12 in standard. Michael Gallup, I have him at 12 points in PPR, 9 in standard. CeeDee Lamb, I have the same. I have him at 12 points in PPR and 9 in standard. Defensively, I have Dallas getting 6 points. Moving over to the Falcons, Matt Ryan, I have him at 19 points.
Hey, Drew, I think your audio cut out, bud. There you go. Okay. You're back.
Breaking up a little bit. Matt Ryan, I have him at 19 points this week. Todd Gurley, I have at 12 points. 9 in standard. Julio, I have him at 18 points PPR. 15 in standard. Calvin Ridley, 15 in PPR, 12 in standard. Russell Gage, I have at 9 points this week in PPR and 6 in standard. I don't look for them to repeat that same performance of all three of them over 100 yards this week. Hayden Hurst, I have him at 8 points in PPR, and that's another reason I think that Gage won't see as many targets. I think they will try to target Hayden Hurst a little bit more. I have him at Hayden Hurst, 8 points PPR and 5 in standard. And as far as their defense goes, I have them at 5 points. Moving on to the Giants and the Bears game.
This will be fun.
Daniel Jones was basically running for his life the whole game last week against the number 1 ranked defense in the Steelers. This week he is going against another great defensive front led by Khalil Mack, and the Bears are ranked 4th in defense this week. So look for it to be kind of the same thing this week for the as far as Daniel Jones goes. That line is young, and as a rookie, you never want to be going against a guy like Khalil Mack. So
yeah, their left tackle, I think
I look for Khalil to have a big day.
Yeah.
Saquon didn't really contribute much in the running game. He only had 6 yards last week, but he did have 6 catches for 60, so he still contributed just in a different way. This week, I think he'll do a little better than he did last week in the running game, and I still think he'll contribute quite a bit as far as Saquon didn't really contribute much in the running game last week. He only had six yards on 15 carries, but he did have 6 catches for 60 yards. I look for him to have another good day receiving, but a better one out of the backfield as far as running wise. And moving on to the receiving core. Slayton was their top point getter last week. He with Golden Tate being out last week, I think it kind of catapulted him into being their main guy. Shepard, he saw a lot of action in the slot last week with Tate being out, but Golden Tate is expected to be back this week, but I think he'll still be limited. So I still look for Slayton and Shepard to be a big part of that. And a guy that didn't really do much last week. Evan Ingram, he only caught 2 passes last week, but I think that he will do a little better this week as far as his catching wise. I think he'll have
I
a
hope
little
so.
more
He's starting.
catches this week. Um, the Giants defense gave up three touchdowns and 4 red zone attempts last week by the Steelers. They're not not a great defense. They're ranked 24th going into the week. So yeah, it which the Bears are not a great offense. So we'll see how that works out. But I think the Bears have a better offense than Giants do defense. So I look for the Bears to take this game. As far as projections go, or excuse me, let me move over to the Bears. Mitchell Trubisky did have a 3 touchdown fourth quarter last week.
Well, you didn't have to make an exception for Mitch or anything. It's not like it.
But I don't think it's as his stats kind of tell a lie. Like when you look at that, 2 of those were short passes inside the red zone, and the other touchdown was off target and a great play by the receiver. He still made a lot of bad throws through those first 3 quarters that just a testament to him being, as I said earlier, I had him as overrated in our earlier shows, and I still think he is. I mean, technically, yes, he got it done in the fourth quarter when he needed to do it. But I still think with him being against a Giants defense that they do have some pass rush, and like you said, I believe you said one of their left tackles is out. I look for the Bears to win, and I think he'll have a little better, or kind of the same game, at least this week. Montgomery was limited with a groin injury last week, but still had a pretty good workload. We even being limited. I look for him to have an even bigger workload this week. And Cohen, he had 47 total against the Lions. and I look for him to be more involved in the passing game this week with Montgomery being fully healthy as far as getting the running touches.
Yeah.
Robertson, he's had a lot of distractions with trade talks and just contract talks, and I'm anxious to see how that affects his play. He was reported that he took all of his Bears, anything involving the Bears, off of his Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts. He took it all off, and I think he has since apologized for doing that, but it's a lot of distractions going on with him. So I look for Anthony Miller to play a little bigger role with all that going on with Robinson. I think he will see a few more targets just because I think Robinson will kind of be off his game a little bit. I mentioned the Bears defense being ranked number 4. Again, I think Khalil Mack will have a field day this week. As far as projections go for the Giants, I have Daniel Jones at 15 points. I have Saquon at 18 points PPR and 15 in the standard. Like I said, I think he'll have a lot better game this week. Slayton, I think I have him at 13 points PPR, 10 in standard. Sterling Shepard, I have him at 8 points PPR and 5 in standard. Evan Ingram, I have him 9 points PPR. Like I said earlier, I think he will receive a few more targets this week, and I think he'll have a little better efficiency than he did catching only two passes last week. I have him 9 points PPR and 7 in standard. The Giants defense, I have them at 4 points. Like I said, they're kind of a weak. Yeah, the Giants defense are kind of a weak defense. I have them at 4 points. Moving on to the Bears, Trubisky, like I said, I think he'll have a pretty decent game against the Giants defense. Still not a starter for me, but I do have him projected at 18 points PPR, or 18 points. I'm sorry, across both leagues. Montgomery, I have him at 12 points PPR and 9 in standard. Tariq Cohen, I think he'll, like I said, be a little more involved in the passing game. So I do have him at 10 points PPR and 7 in standard. Robertson, even with his struggles, I still think he will get his targets. I have him 13 PPR and 10 in standard. Anthony Miller, I have him at 11 points PPR and 9 in standard. The Bears defense, I have them at 9 points. Like I said, I think Khalil Mack will have a field day going up against a rookie in front of him. So I look for that to create some turnovers and hey. So moving on to the Packers and the Lions. While I don't look for Aaron Rodgers to repeat a 47-point performance, I do think he will have a great game against a subpar Lions defense that is battling some injuries in the secondary. So that's never good when you're going against Aaron Rodgers. The running game last week for the Packers was decent. Look for it to be a little better against the Lions. Last year, Aaron Jones was a touchdown machine for the Packers, and with a much easier matchup this week than the Vikings defense, I think he'll have a little better game even this week. Devontae Adams for the Packers. He had a 43-point performance last week. I don't see him repeating that, but again, I do think he will have a great game with the Lions secondary being injury ridden, I guess. Lazard, I think he'll have a pretty good game this week. He played pretty good last week, even against a strong Vikings defense. I don't see him having the game that he did last week. I think he ended up with 19 points, 18 points, 19 points last week in PPR. I see him coming back to reality a little bit this week. Just what I think how the game will go. The defense, although Aaron Rodgers and the offense looked pretty good, the defense did give up 34 points last week, but was it against a pretty good offense in the Vikings as well. I look for them to have a little better game against a subpar Lions team. Moving over to the Lions. The big surprise for the Lions last week, I think, and I think everybody was surprised, was how Adrian Peterson came in and played in his first game with the Lions, only being there for maybe a week.
He's got to get popped by test at
that
some
goes
point by
to
the
show
NFL.
you the type of pro pro and intelligent player that Adrian Peterson is, he's kind of like that Frank Gore type of guy that just keeps going and going no matter where he goes. And he's proven time and time again that he still has something left in the tank. Marvin Jones, he's got a pretty tough matchup in Alexander for the Packers, and Galladay is still out, so I do think he'll get some targets. But again, facing Jair Alexander for the Packers, that's going to be a tough matchup. And I think a guy that will benefit from that is Danny Amendola. I think he'll be a big part this week. And TJ Hawkinson, last week he got a lot of double teams with Galladay being out, and I think he'll see more of that this week in this game. As far as the defense goes, the Lions defense is ranked 28th, and Aaron Rodgers is playing like a man on a mission so far. So I don't think that they will slow Aaron Rodgers down any. So moving on to projections, I have Aaron Rodgers at 24 points this week. I don't think he repeats that 47-point performance. Aaron Jones, I have him 16 PPR, 13 in standard. Devontae Adams, I have him at 18 points PPR, 15 standard. Lazard, as I said, I think he'll come back to reality. I don't think he'll repeat that performance he had last week, but I still think he has a pretty good game. I got him at 10 in PPR, 7 in standard. The Packers defense, I have them at 7 points. They are ranked 13th this week as far as the matchup goes. So with the lines, I have Matthew Stafford at 15 points. And Adrian Peterson, I have him at 11 points PPR and 9 in standard. Marvin Jones, I still think he'll get some targets, even though facing Alexander will be tough. I got him at 12 PPR and 9 in standard. Danny Amendola, I have him at 11 points PPR and 9 in standard. Hawkinson, I have him at 9 points. Like I said, I think he'll face a lot of double teams again this week, but he will get some targets for sure. 9 in PPR, 6 in standard, and the defense for the Lions, I have them at 4 points. Like I said, I don't think they're ready for what they're about to get today. Moving on to the Eagles and the Rams. Eagles did have some protection problems last week. That they allowed 8 sacks last week. That's not good news when you're facing the Rams and Aaron Donald in that front that they have. And he was definitely feeling the pressure. And he threw for 2 interceptions last week, and I don't think that's a good sign for Carson Wentz. I think there'll be more of that this week. Their running game was pretty much absent with Miles Sanders being out. He is back this week, and the Rams did allow 5 yards per carry to the Cowboys last week between Zeke and the other runners. Eagles defense only allowed 2.2 yards per carry last week, and only allowed 159 yards through the air against Washington last week. But it is a little tougher matchup this week, so we'll see how that fares. The Rams threw for 275 yards last week, but they do have a little tougher secondary matchup against the Eagles this week, with big play Slate on the opposite side. Malcolm Brown, he averaged 4.4 yards per carry last week, and like I said, the Eagles only allowed 2.2, so we'll see how that all works out. Robert Woods had a big day last week against the Cowboys. He almost seemed like he was unstoppable against the Cowboys. But like I said, he has a tougher matchup with the Eagles secondary this week. As far as projections go, the Eagles, I do have Carson Wentz at 16 points. Maybe I'm thinking maybe that they will change some things around as far as the offense goes and allow him to get a little more time, maybe some short throws to kind of offset that defensive front that the Rams have. Sanders is back this week. I got him at 15 points in PPR. 12 in standard, I'm sorry. Deshaun Jackson, I have him at 10 points PPR, 7 in standard. Jalen Reagor, I have 7 points PPR and 5 in standard. And the tight end position is pretty interesting for the Eagles. Zach Ertz, he's another guy that's got some distractions going on with the contract talk, and I think he feels some type of way with the Eagles. He feels like he deserves a contract, and And I kind of think, in my personal opinion, I kind of think that last week the Eagles coaching staff kind of sent a message like, "Oh, well, we have a guy just as good, if not better, right behind you in Dallas Goddard." So that's going to be a interesting situation there with the tight ends in Philly. I do have Dallas Goddard at 11 points, and in PPR and 9 in standard. I do think Ertz will see some more targets this week. I have him at 9 in PPR and 6 in standard. The Eagles defense is ranked 14th, and I do think
You muted yourself somehow.
the type of game he had last week, but I think he will still
There we go. Okay.
do fairly well. I have him at 11 in PPR and 8 in standard. Robert Woods, I got him at 14 PPR and 11 in standard. Uh, Cooper Cup, I have him at 13 points in PPR and 10 in standard. Tyler Higbee, I have him 9 points PPR and 6 in standard. And the Rams defense, I have them at 7 points in this week. Just moving on to the Buccaneers and the Panthers. The Buccaneers offense last week, some say they struggled, and there was a lot of heat on Tom Brady last week. But he did have 2 touchdown passes and scored one. He accounted for 20 without the field goals, 20 points, or excuse me, he had 21 points of the 23 points they
Drew, it looks like the camera cut
scored
out,
last
but we'll
week.
just keep going so we can do it.
I don't think you can put that all on Tom Brady. I think it was a lot of that they just weren't on the same page, and I think that has a lot to do with the limited off season and no preseason games. I do think they will fare a little better this week. Brady versus the Panthers secondary should be a good matchup. They gave up a 107 passer rating last week, and they did not have a sack in that game. So, if you give Brady time and time to find somebody, he can pick you apart for sure. He's not the GOAT for no reason. Ronald Jones, I think he'll have a nice day against the defense that gave up 3 touchdowns and 130 yards last week. So
Yeah. All right. It seems like we lost Drew's audio. So until then, I'll just go ahead and put in my second segment that we did last week until we can get that other part up and going again. But I got my top 5 wide receiver matchups ranked and my bottom 5 for wide receivers and tight ends, their matchups against who's guarding them. And I got them ranked in order. So the top 5, the top wide receiver to look out for this week is Marquise Brown versus Bradley Roby. He's going to be the top one, I believe. Second on that list, Julio Jones is going against Trayvon Diggs. I think he's winning that one handsomely. Anthony Miller at number 3 versus Darnay Holmes. Fourth, I got Adam Humphries versus DJ Hayden. And fifth, I got Amari Cooper versus AJ Terrell. But I'm also tying 5 with Thielen versus Rock Yasin, who's covering him. So Thielen or Amari Cooper can be ranked at 5th, in my opinion, as my so that rounds out my top 5, technically top 6 of the top matchups of wide receivers. Now my bottom 5, I'm ranking this like 1 being the 5th worst, and then 5 being the worst. So right now, at number 1, I got Curtis Samuel going because he's going against Sean Murphy-Bunting. Number 2, I got DK Metcalf versus J.C. Jackson. Number 4, Brashard Perriman versus Akello Witherspoon. Number 5, again, I got a tie between Christian Kirk versus Ronald Darby and Marquise Valdez-Scantling versus Darrell Roberts. So those are my wide receiver quarterback matchup rankings, my top 5 and bottom 5. And now I have my top 5 and bottom 5 matchup rankings for tight ends versus their safety or linebacker that's guarding them. Top 5, number 1, I got Gronk versus Shaq Thompson. If him and Tom Brady can just find a way to make it work, I know that'll be a good matchup. Hayden Hurst versus Jalen Smith, as Drew talked about. Hayden's a good matchup there. Jared Cook for the Saints versus Corey Littleton. Mark Andrews, as always, is going to make this list versus Eric Murray. And then my 5th one, Hunter Henry, is going to do well against Anthony Hitchens. Bottom 5 matchup, again, starting from 1 going to 5 being the worst. So Ian Thomas versus Antoine Woodfield Jr., Evan Ingram versus Roquan Smith being the second. Even though I want Evan Ingram to work this week, I don't think he's going to work that well this week. He's starting for me personally, so this hurts reading it. 3, I got Chris Herndon versus Fred Warner. 4, Mike Gesicki versus Jordan Poyer. Even though I could be wrong on that because they don't really have much going on in the passing game other than Mike Gesicki for the Dolphins. Because both of their top wide receivers are banged up, and their running game didn't do that great last week. And Fitzy only 344% passer rating. So Gesicki could go easily from bottom 5 to top 5, but right now I got him in my bottom 5. And then the worst matchup, I think personally, is Jimmy Graham versus Blake Martinez. A little bit of because they're just both bad players now. So, all right. Oh, hey, Drew, got your camera. All right, so that's going to be it for our Outsiders Fantasy Football podcast for the Sunday slate. We'll go ahead and get this on here and get it posted up for you guys so you can start making
Cardinals.
changes.
Washington played pretty smart.
So it looks like Drew's still having technical difficulties with his. Sorry about that. But on behalf of me and Drew, thank you again for following us. Please continue to help us out. Sorry about the audio and video issue we were having today. We are working on getting that fixed out as soon as possible. But look for us to be back. Number one, previewing the Monday night game. And we're going to be doing that live streaming on Monday, a few hours before the game, like we usually do. For you wrestling fans, today we're doing a This Week in Wrestling, so that will be up tomorrow and ready to go for everybody. We might even try to have it up tonight or today if we can do it early enough. So be looking for that either this evening or tomorrow morning. That the wrestling episode will be up. And then Tuesday we're going to review This Week in Football. So that's how it's going to work for the next few episodes. And we will see you then. As always, come with us if you want to win. Thank you guys. We appreciate you. Peace.